Welcome to another edition of Racin. I am Matt Harrelson, of course, alongside with me for the proverbial ride, Russell Parker. Have a good week, man.
It was awesome. I mean, 3, 4, 5 races we had over the weekend, and it was a lot of fun watching all those races. I know we're about to get into it right now.
We are, and perhaps sloppy is the best word to describe the Daytona 500. But, of course, NASCAR officially kicked off the season with all 3 national series this past weekend. Of course, with the Daytona 500 headlining, and it was an emotional one. I guess that's the best way to put it. So let's take a look at the race recap.
Well, it was definitely a crazy race, but overall it started off really simple. 2 wide it started off with, and a lot of people did not say that was going to happen at this race. We've seen in the duels and the clash that it was going to be single file, like a freight train running around the track. But no, everybody kind of got together and did a 2 wide all the way through. 40 cars helped that out a lot more because you cannot do it at 20. But moving over here to lap 11, there was a salute for J.D. Gibbs. He actually passed away last month to degenerative neurological disease in early January. That was Joe Gibbs' son. And that tribute there between all of the JGR teams happened there on lap 11. That was an emotional time there, and you can see right now that he's praying. So, Joe Gibbs had an emotional day today, or Sunday rather. But, trouble began on lap 22 for Corey LaJoie. And the right side of his car there, you can see it has a lot of damage from it. I think he might have hit some debris, probably got caught with somebody. But you can see his car there has his face on it, so his face and his beard not in a good stance right now. Moving on to lap 51 was a 6-car wreck involving Kurt Busch and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. It looked like Stenhouse had gotten underneath Busch there, but you can see it also collected Darrell Wallace Jr. in the 43 car, and Jamie McMurray in that 40 car there got caught up in it a little bit. And I think that might have been Austin Dillon there at the bottom. He got caught up in it as well. So a couple cars there on lap 51 getting caught up in a little accident. But some of these guys were still able to continue racing. As you can see, the 43 and the 1 car got locked up together. But moving on to lap 160, drivers coming down for pit road to get gas and tires. And, well, a big one that started out right here. And the 31 car, you can see right there, just got all up into the 48. He was involved in that wreck, and a couple of other guys. Overall, and some of the guys actually got avoided a little bit, but you can see here the 52 car just slammed into the back of the 31. And then, unfortunately for Jimmy Johnson, he got caught up in that as well. And you can see some of the people on the side there on pit road, they're kind of scurrying out of the way. But going on to lap 182, Kyle Larson spins out, single car spin out here. But he manages to save it, only gets a little bit of a scratch there at the top of from the wall there, but no contact with anybody else, so good driving by Larson. Keselowski, on the other hand, on lap 188, he got in some trouble with a blown out tire on the right side. And, he was he had the odds in his favor to win this race to start off with. Start from the back, and it wasn't a good day for him as he continued to have trouble. But check out the over 100,000 in attendance today. That was Sunday. That was including the stands and the campground. So a big sellout crowd for Daytona this past Sunday. Moving on to lap 182 was the big one, which involved 21 cars. In my notes, I had only 12, but when I went back through the statistics, and it showed that 21 cars were involved in this. Some of them did get to walk away from it, but that 95 car there, Matt DiBenedetto, was probably the biggest impact of this race because he was running really well. He even led laps and had a great day. And unfortunately, his car got tore up along with many others. Eric Almirola's car is on top of that 38 machine. But that wasn't the end. We had more big trouble here on lap 196. Stenhouse involved with this one, as well as Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, Brad Keselowski involved in that one there as well. And it all started almost up to the very front of it. So this one collected a lot of cars as well. And we'll look at Ryan Preece there and going down on the double yellow line there to avoid that accident. Here we are on board with him. And he just gets through it unscathed, and really impressive driving by the 47 driver. But overtime, lap 200, another big one. And this one definitely took out a lot of big impacted drivers such as William Byron and Chase Elliott, Hendrick favorites to win this race tonight. And or Sunday night rather. And Unfortunately, it just took out a lot of big names like Clinton Boyer there, who gets plated in front of Chase Elliott. So unfortunately for them, it was really bad. But fortunately for one driver in particular, Denny Hamlin, coming around off of turns 3 and 4, and him and his Joe Gibbs driver, they're going to come up and get a 1-2-3 finish over Joey Logano, who finishes 4th. So Kyle Busch and Eric Jones finishing right behind Hamlin in 2 and 3. And once again, going back to that emotional day for Joe Gibbs Racing, Denny Hamlin picking up the win for Joe Gibbs, honoring the race in JD's name. And so overall, it was just a really, really big win for them. And of course, that means that Denny Hamlin is going to start off the season with a bang. He's got his second Daytona 500 championship, and he's going to be moving on into the playoffs, which is about 35 races away now. And he's going to be doing. Check out the burnouts here. There's a really nice shot here of the burnouts right here on the front stretch. And overall, it was just a big victory for Joe Gibbs. It couldn't get any better than this.
So with the victory, as we just mentioned, Denny Hamlin gets his second Daytona 500 championship, and that's going to put him at the top of the leaderboard in the standings. And already the 11 team has a spot in the playoffs, which leads me to my next question for you. When you win this early in the season, what's your strategy moving forward if you've already got a shot at the championship? I mean, 7 months out. What's his motivation at this point?
You can learn a lot in the next 7 months because if you're looking forward, a lot of the tracks you're going to come up across, such as Phoenix in a few weeks, you'll be going back to that race in the playoffs. So you can take that, you can take a breather. You're going to be in it. Now you want to learn what you can do for these upcoming races, especially with the new rules package. You want to try and figure it out as fast as you can, especially at the tracks that are going to be featured in the playoffs. So going forward, such as Phoenix, Martinsville, Texas, those type of tracks, or it's going to be very crucial to understand your car at those tracks. I think you're going to see Hamlin. I think he's still going to contend for wins. I think a lot of the drivers, they still want to win. And, of course, the more wins you get, the more bonus points you're going to get going into the playoffs. And that always carries over through playoffs, because it helps your score going forward.
It just seems like it could be very easy to, no pun intended, but take your foot off the gas when you're already given a spot in the playoffs. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any other sport does anything close to this. It'd be like the Panthers playing Week 1 in the NFL, winning, and that automatically puts them in the playoffs 7 months later. It's just a little odd, but
it is. And I think what happens is all these teams are competing with each other every single week versus in the NFL where you got to play one team per week. So I think that's why it works for this system better than it would somewhere else.
Okay. All right, well, it's time to move over to some of the top stories that came out during this week. On Tuesday, Kyle Larson and Chip Ganassi Racing announced that McDonald's is going to be a primary sponsor for the 42 car. So the fast food chain previously rode along with Jamie McMurray. Of course, now he's moving on into behind the desk for Fox Sports. But the last race they sponsored him in was the Daytona 500 in a one-off race. But, Russell, I know that you eat at Mickey D's every day. I tell you need to cut it out. However, you're young. You can get away with it. But what's your takeaway on this?
Well, my mom told me I should stop eating there. But, I got to say I applaud McDonald's. I didn't know if they would actually stick around in NASCAR after McMurray. McMurray actually got the nickname Big Mac. Jamie Mack from.
Well, I was going to say, you think the fact that his name has MC in it had anything to do with that?
I think it did. Of course, you might see this car up here. It's Bill Elliott's old car variant. He had McDonald's on there for a long time as well. So I think McDonald's. I think they actually sponsor Kyle Larson in other events outside of NASCAR. So I think it just kind of makes sense, and they work with the same team as McMurray. I think it just kind of folds over and says, "Hey, we'll continue."
An easy, smooth transition.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they wrote it in his contract that he'll now have to go as Kyle McLarson.
That'd be pretty cool.
We'll have to wait and see on that. But going back to the Daytona 500 itself and the closing laps, as we were just teasing a minute ago, 2018 champion Joey Logano had an issue with trying to find a draft partner to help push him to the front. So Logano questioned fellow Ford driver Michael McDowell after the race on why he chose to go behind the Toyota driven by Kyle Busch.
It was just when Kyle got a great run down the backstretch, there was no blocking that move, and we were going to crash if I was going to try to block that one. So I had to let that one go. And I thought, with the blue oval behind him, that the forward would come with me. It's kind of the choices that you have to make, and you have a split-second decision on all that. And typically you kind of expect manufacturers to work together, like the Toyotas do or the Chevys do. And I just was expecting that as well in that moment coming to a checker flag, and was very surprised by his decision.
McDowell responded to Logano saying he doesn't get paid to push Logano to a win. That's a good point. I mean, it's not his duty to make sure that Logano wins, but you can think about it. You have to make a split-second decision on what was the fastest car, who had the best shot of winning the race, and that's where he went. So should manufacturers help each other out in situations like this?
I think they should, because it boils down to you got your individual team. I think in the closing laps, though, I think it's anybody for themselves. Even among teammates themselves, I think if Brad Keselowski and Logano were going at it, I would expect Logano to help Keselowski get a win. But if Logano had an opportunity to win, I think he'd take it as well. I think every driver in that situation will take what's going to work best for their team, especially a team like especially the team that Michael McDowell drives for. They're kind of a smaller team. Winning for them will be huge for them, and I think going forward, you're going to see teams where they're not really wanting to. I mean, they'll work with each other throughout the season. You've seen Toyota and Chevrolet work together in the 500 race itself, and then they kind of disbanded between each other when it got down to the final few laps. So I think manufacturers, it's great if you can work with them, but when it comes down to the last lap, any man for himself.
Absolutely. Of course, McDowell, not one of the more well-known names, but you have to put yourself in that driver's shoes and realize, again, that is such a quick decision that they have to make, where you're trying to weigh several different factors, and I would imagine that manufacturer falls down behind yourself and then your teammates, right?
I would think so too,
Yeah. So, all right. So before we get to the next Cup race, moving forward, let's break down that Truck Series race, if you can even call it that. I think Demolition Derby is the correct statement, but the Next Era Energy Resources 250 started with 32 trucks, ended with just 9, though. Their survivor, a.k.a. the winner, was 24-year-old Austin Hill out of Winston, Georgia. Russell, what's your take?
Well, I completely agree. Wreckfest,
Yes.
Demolition Derby, all that goes together. This was the most cautions in this race too. 9 trucks left over. The previous number of that was 12. So Truck Series usually has a bad rep for having a lot of big wrecks in this race. And I was up here at the office watching it, and I was just like, come on, get this race over with. Because they were all the big ones were happening at the end of the race. I'm just like, I'm ready to go home. And I think wrecking all these trucks, it comes down to experience of these guys. Yeah. The Truck Series is a lot of new talent that comes in from the very bottom. This is the first time being on a national level. And it's Daytona. I mean, you can't get much bigger than that for your first big race ever. So.
Let me ask you this. We saw a lot of wrecks in this series. We saw a lot of wrecks in the 500. Is the course to blame any?
I think maybe not the track, but probably the plate racing itself. Of course, this will be the last time they ever do plate racing. We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yep.
But I think tight racing. People love the tight racing. At least I do, because it makes the race interesting all the way through. Take the 500 for example. I try to get up to do other stuff. I just couldn't. I had to sit there and watch the whole thing because there was always an interesting moment. Truck race was like that. Xfinity Series wasn't really like that, but overall I really enjoyed it, except for the finish, how long it took for them to finish.
Well, it brings more drama to the race.
Yeah, it does.
And I think that's what NASCAR ultimately wants. So, but if you didn't get enough of the freight train racing that we saw in the Clash and the Duels, you probably love the Xfinity Series race on Saturday. So let's focus more on the outcome of the race. JR Motorsports, Michael Lynette, and the number 1 Chevrolet was the victor. Now, Russell, you gave a lot of praise to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s team on Facebook this week, but do you think JRM ever will make it on the Cup Series level anytime soon?
Probably not anytime soon. I think it's really tough to get into the Cup Series now with all the top-heavy teams that you have, such as Hendrick, which is a team that Junior probably still has a very close affiliation with. He doesn't want to compete with them. I'm sure that Hendrick probably provides the motors for his Xfinity team. But, I got to say that I think Junior Motorsports is definitely on the up and up. this is probably what we probably would have seen with Dale Earnhardt Incorporated whenever it was at its best before Earnhardt passed away, which was actually I think it's 19 years ago now.
18 or 19 years ago. That was one day this week that was celebrated.
But yeah, I think for that, pretty big win there for Junior Motorsport to start off the season, and they had a great season last year as well. I think they can only go on up from here.
Yeah, and talking about Earnhardt Senior's passing, of course. If you're old enough like myself to remember, of course, the week right after that was Rockingham, and of course it was very somber and quiet, and that's all people were talking about, rightfully so. But all right, Daytona is now behind us. We've still got a lot of racing to come, though. 35 more points races ahead. The next stop is in Hampton, Georgia, down at Atlanta Motor Speedway. So starting this Saturday at 2 p.m. will be the Xfinity Series race. Right after that, the Gander, not Gandor. That sounds like Lord of the Rings. Gander Outdoor Truck Series race is going to begin. It's a doubleheader. What you expecting from these two?
Well, it's going to be, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this race. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of cup race drivers in it, and I don't really like that. I'm not a fan of seeing drivers like Harvick, Logano, Keselowski, and Busch.
You want to see the young guys.
I want to see young guys, especially in the truck series, and in the Xfinity series, I think is okay sometimes. But I think if anyone who's a previous Cup champion should not be racing in the lower series, I think once you get that title, you should be cut out of it all in all. But they do limit them every year. But Atlanta's usually the first place they start at. So I like to see a lot of young guys get up in front, but I think we're going to see a lot of domination out of those Cup Series regulars. So I'm not saying the race is going to be boring, but I think the race probably won't be as interesting as it was for the Truck Series for Daytona, or if it is when it's in the playoff time.
I think I've asked you this last year during the season, but in your opinion, is it positive or negative or neither to have a lot of the Cup guys be in the quote-unquote minor league races, if you will?
I think the positive is that you get more attention because their fan base will watch that. If I'm a Logano fan, and I will watch the Xfinity Series race because he's racing in it. But the negative is that it takes away an opportunity for these Xfinity Series drivers to really hit the spotlight.
See what they can do.
Yeah, but another positive too as well is that those guys actually say they want to race the Cup drivers because that's the best. They're racing against the best, and I just wish that they had more of an equal equipment to make that more of an interesting race.
And it gives them a chance, like you just said, to try and prove themselves against potentially the main guys that they'll be competing against if they're successful enough at the next level. So to me, I compare it to, I always go back to baseball. And we'll see sometimes where a major league guy will get hurt. He'll go on the DL. Well, he'll make a couple of minor league starts, and he'll go down to whatever the AAA place is. Well, of course, the bigger the name, the more tickets they're going to sell at that level. And, of course, a lot of even the younger guys there, they want to see the guys that are at the show and like hear stories.
In pro wrestling, the same way. If you have a former WWE guy come down to a lower series, they're going to sell out that place.
They want to check it out, absolutely. So let's move on to the main event, and that's going to be the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500 on Sunday at 2 p.m. on Fox and PRN. Now, Daytona, as we mentioned earlier, marks the end of the restrictor plate era. Atlanta is going to be the final race to show off the new tapered spacing rules package. Now, we've talked about this new package before a few weeks ago, but what are we going to expect to see in this race coming up?
Whew, that is $1 million question. But I think
is it worth $1 million?
And the All-Star race last year it certainly was, and that's when we first saw this. So I think what we're going to see here is more similar to what we've seen in plate racing, where they're close together. Somebody out front is going to have the cleanest air, probably going to be the faster driver. I still expect to see a Kevin Harvick kind of guy to be up there and kind of dominating. I know the drivers have complained that it's really difficult to pass in this package, but we haven't raced that at Atlanta yet, and it's probably going to be different for every track, especially on the 1.5 mile track. So it's going to.
I was about to say, for those that aren't familiar, Atlanta is, what's the logistics of Atlanta?
It's a 1.5 mile track, similar to what you see at Charlotte. Okay. Texas is around the same realm of it as well. So it's most people call it a D-oval or cookie cutter or something like that. So I think you're going to see, like I said, you're going to see some really close pack action. Fans love it. You've seen it at Daytona 500. They sold out for that type of racing. So Talladega does the same thing. So I think that's what fans would like to see is more of that type of racing.
You expect to see a lot of wrecks like we did this past weekend?
I don't expect to see a lot of wrecks because I think the cars are going to be a little slower and easier for them to control. Now, if somebody blows a tire, you'll definitely collect a lot of cars
Yeah,
for sure.
well, not much you can do about that, though. All right, so before I get your race winner prediction, let's take a pit stop and play America's favorite new NASCAR racing game, Checkers or Wreckers. So we started this last week. People seem to enjoy it. We're going to do it again. All of these are in relation to the 2020 schedule. So I'm sure our favorite racetrack is going to be mentioned somewhere among these. So number one, Checkers or Wreckers. NASCAR should have races in the middle of the week. This is very interesting.
It is, and NASCAR does do this for the Truck Series. Wednesday night they'll have a dirt race. So I'm going to say, I want to say Checkers because I think it's an interesting idea, especially if you get into the time where NFL season's kicking off. But I'm going to say Wreckers because when you go to a race, and I think this is more about the experience being at the race. Fans who show up for that, they want to be there all weekend. If you got to work in the middle of the week, you're not going to be able to stay there 3 days out of that whole week. So I'm going to say Wreckers. I think for people at the track, it's going to hurt.
That is the downfall. And, other sports are played during the week all the time. However, it's a shorter period of time that's taken up. And as you just mentioned, people want to tailgate. They want to be there for the entire experience and take it all in. And unfortunately, if they were to do it during a weekday night, I don't think you'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, number two, Checkers or Wreckers. The schedule currently has 36 points races, and some say that is too long and should be shortened.
I'm going to say Checkers on this one. I think the race season is a little long. I think maybe you don't cut out too many. I think I would say maybe 30 is probably the most. That would be. I think a solid number would be good for that.
Who do you cut out?
Now that is a tough question, and it'll be very difficult to take some races away. I think anybody who has a second race date, maybe those will be the first ones up for taking away. I know the track owners will hate that.
I was about to say, I can imagine them not going quietly on that. They'd probably go kicking and screaming because that's money out of their wallets.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say Checkers, I think it should be shortened, maybe 6 races.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, I go back to baseball. Baseball's 162 games. That needs to be shortened because it weighs on people. I mean, 36 races, that's over half the year.
And there's only 2 breaks in between. So, Easter, and then there's another one that happens.
Do you think it'd be beneficial not only to the fans but to the drivers to maybe have a little more of a break somewhere in there?
For drivers, it would, and for teams for sure as well, because that saves them money, and they're always talking about they need to save money. And maybe it's even more beneficial to the track. So the people say they don't have enough people showing up for a track; it looks empty.
Yeah.
Well, if you have shorter racing, you only got it once a year.
There's more anticipation.
More people will come to that one race, and having it divided out in a different parts of the year, where people have to pick and choose which one they want to go to.
Yeah. All right, number 3. Instead of taking tracks away, let's talk about adding some tracks potentially. Right. So short tracks, Rockingham Speedway, Fairground Speedway in Nashville, Gateway Motorsport Park in Madison, Illinois, and Iowa Speedway should all be added to the schedule. Checkers or Wreckers?
I'm going to say Checkers for sure, not just because Rockingham's on there, but Iowa is one of my favorite tracks when the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series go there. I would love to see that one get a Cup Series schedule. If any of those tracks there, that one should probably I would say Rockingham's number 1, but I think Iowa because they've already got
taking away
there.
the nostalgia of it.
I think Iowa probably one of the first ones up for saying, hey, let's have a Cup race. And Fairgrounds, I don't know enough about Fairgrounds, but I know they've had a Cup race in there in the past. So if they're up and willing to do it, I think it can happen. And Gateway, I believe, used to be a Cup race track as well. It's been on the Truck Series schedule for a while, and they've had some great racing out there as well in the past.
Didn't Iowa have a Cup race at one point, I feel like?
I don't recall it, but
maybe back in the day.
I know there's been a lot of tight racing between Xfinity and Truck Series lately.
Yeah. Well, obviously Nashville, having a race there would be bringing a race to obviously the biggest country music capital of the world. And Nashville's a big city, so they'd be able to handle the people. Now, of course, we would obviously like to see Rockingham be number 1 on that list, but those are all really good tracks that they could potentially add to the schedule. It doesn't even have to be the Cup Series, though, does it?
No, that was kind of edged towards the Cup Series, but for Rockingham, for example, and Fairgrounds, those guys can probably pick up a Truck Series and Xfinity Series race, add the K&N Series back to it as well. ARCA is now under NASCAR's control, as some ARCA races again. There's many opportunities for NASCAR to come back to these tracks.
Yeah, there are some choices now among what you could potentially bring here. So, moving
And
on.
it's in high demand for short tracks.
There you go. And we also have the Little Rock here.
Yeah.
So, in addition to everything else. Number 4, Checkers or Wreckers, road courses. Canadian Tire Motorsport Park and Road America should be added to the 2020 schedule.
I'm going to say 100% Checkers on this one. I want to see more cup racing, especially, course racing, especially in the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got two courses that are in the regular season. Only one now, which is the Roval, is in the playoffs. I think there should be more.
And we saw how popular the Roval was firsthand. People
Yeah.
love that.
It was amazing how fun that race was, and maybe even not just Canadian Tire and Road America, but add some other Rovals. I know Daytona has a layout for that, although I don't really want to see that.
That's my next question. You know, again, we were able to go to Charlotte and go to the Roval race last year. Now, obviously, in any sport, if something's popular, other places are going to try to copycat it. Do you expect to see other courses, maybe Atlanta, something like that, to try to put a Roval in?
I would like to see maybe Pocono do it. I think Pocono probably a good one because they actually have a lot there. I mean, Pocono has not been that exciting of a race in the past couple of years, and they have 2 on the schedule, so they might be one of those up for going away. So if they want to stay in, they might have to change up the layout and put the road course part of it in there, and I think that would make it pretty interesting.
Absolutely. People still want to go check it out.
Yep.
So, and finally, number 5, a street race and a dirt race should be added to the 2020 schedule. Checkers or Wreckers?
I am going to say, I'm going to actually say Wreckers on this one.
Okay.
I love dirt racing. I've seen a little bit of it, and I love it. But I don't think the Cup Series is quite ready for that just yet. I think.
Why not?
I think it's too big. I think there's 40 drivers out there on a quarter-mile track. I think that's just too many cars.
A little convoluted.
But I think maybe the Xfinity Series is big enough for it. They have 36 cars, I think, or 32 cars. It's a little bit shorter. I think that's enough. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see it, though, and I would not object to it if it does happen. I just don't know if it's really, logistical speaking, I don't think it's really there. Street racing, though, I think this is kind of opportunity for the Northwest to get involved in racing, and that might be a way to break into it. So if I could split them up, I still might say Wreckers on this.
Well, when you say street racing, I automatically think almost like being on the dragway, sort of, where you're on a quarter mile. What do you mean by street racing?
Street racing is racing on city streets.
Oh,
So
like we see with Formula One kind of thing?
Yeah, they take some parts of actual city street and they'll race on it. And I think that would be pretty interesting to see. I'm just not sure if the market for NASCAR fans is
I'm not
really
sure
there.
where you go about doing that either.
And I think the Northwest will be a proper place to do it because they have no tracks up there representing them.
But where? Seattle, Portland, something along those lines?
So maybe they do it in, somewhere up there, maybe.
Idaho. All right. Let's move from Idaho back down here to the southeast. Heading down to Hotlanta this weekend. Who you got?
I am going to take Kevin Harvick just off of based on previous seasons. He's done very well there. I think Jimmy Johnson might be able to get up there because he had a really good finish there a couple years ago. But I think Kevin Harvick's going to get this one here. He's just, we got a new rules package, so it's hard to say that he's going to dominate. But I think once he gets out front, he's going to keep it. Yeah. And it's going to be very hard to get away from him.
And it's up in the air right now. So, Kevin Harvick, let me write that down. We're going to keep you locked into that. So, anything else you want to add before we close up shop here?
That is all I've got.
All right. Daytona 500 in the books. It was another exciting one. The only sport I know where the Super Bowl of the sport is the first match. So.
And you can argue that the Daytona 500 is just as big of winning that as it is a a championship.
Yeah, 100,000 people there. That's not by accident. So, anyway. Of course, hopefully Rockingham will be able to mix it up here in the future at some level. We keep talking about it. We keep doing that because hopefully one of these days someone will listen to us and bring it in. So,
well, I plan on mentioning Rockingham Speedway at least once every episode.
There you go.
So, there you go.
There you go.
Get
So
tired of it.
We will. Those have to get over it. So anyway, we'll come back next week, let you know how it turned out in Atlanta. See if Russell was correct on his Kevin Harvick pick. In the meantime, Russell Parker, I'm Matt Harrelson. We'll see you right back here next week for another edition of Ross Racing.